Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. My hopefully less glitchy book garden tonight. This is Peerless, Book 5, Part 7, our final part. There we go. It finally focused back on me. But little logistics. So this is a chill stream. Hi, Chi Chi Kiki. I'm going to lower it just a little bit so it'll actually focus on my face. Okay. There we go. It's a little annoying when it stops focusing on my face, and it's doing it again. Oh well. How you doing tonight, Chi Chi Kiki? Good, I hope. But this is a chill stream. What that means is I will be talking to my lovely book garden. I'll be talking to myself. I will be making comments about the book, and I might occasionally look something up. If that's not really your flavor of reading, it's totally okay. It isn't everyone's. But maybe stick around. It is the very end of the story, after all. But if not, it's okay. I am doing all right. I'm just hoping that the crazy weather that's going on outside right now is not going to majorly mess with the stream. So far, so good. But we will see. I'm very excited about the final stream for Peerless. Like, we've been reading stuff from this author for so long. And this is it. And it's kind of crazy to think about. So I'm very excited. Okay, this is also a mature stream. So we will be discussing and or having things happen that are 18 plus, be it gory, be it sexy, be it however it may be. And this author is very detailed, so listen at your own risk. In that sense, though, this book does also have triggering things. I have never read this before, so I do not have the ability to predict or to know, more so, when triggering things are going to occur. Sometimes I have a little bit of a sense of when something might happen and can potentially set a warning. But if you're here live, there's only so much I can do. So if things get a little dicey and you think it might come up on something upsetting, then maybe watch it later. I will not be offended. Nobody's going to be offended, but be kind to yourself and your mental health. I think it might be smooth sailing, but I also don't know how vivid and descriptive those extras are going to be. So, hello, Truffle. It's been sunny and rainy alternately. Yeah, when I just popped upstairs to grab my drink and everything, it was coming down. So, yeah. But yes. Regarding trigger warnings, though, if after the video is done and you are watching it later, if there are triggering things that occur or something comes up, it will be in the title, it will be in the description, and it will have a timestamp. So there's that. There'd be a description, very simplified description of what happened in the comments, and we will go from there. But yes. And then I am not sponsored. I do this because I can, because I want to. The only thing I own is my time and the physical copy of this book in front of me, and sometimes not even that. So, yes, very much not sponsored. I am also not fluent. I am trying my best, but you will notice that, especially for cities and names, there might be a little bit of stumble, and there might just be a little bit of stumble in general, but I am doing my best. My glasses are a little too shiny, and they are distracting me more than being a little blurry will be. So we are losing the glasses for right now. But yeah, pronunciation is hard. So that, I think we're about done with logistics. I am so excited for this. I know I've said it, but we are here at the end. And what an end I imagine it's going to be. But I am also looking forward to copper coins. I know a little bit more about copper coins than I started out knowing with this one. So I can say I'm very excited to get to that one as well. But I don't think, other than potential, oh, yes. If there is a tornado that is coming down my street, I do live with my family. So if we hear people coming down the stairs, this may be a part tour. But I don't hopefully see that happening. But I'm giving you the heads up now. If all of a sudden the stream has to end because there's a tornado, the stream has to end because there's a tornado. But I don't see that happening. On that note, let's just go ahead and get into it. Okay. So last time we had Chubuchu and Xiaolu fighting off the snake cage. Yeah, thank you, Truffle, for not holding me responsible for the weather. I appreciate it. So they are underneath the temple, and they are dealing with different arrays as well as mythical seeming snakes. So Chubuchu was dealing with a giant poisonous snake that he hallucinated was the Jade of Heaven's Lake, and he figured it out and woke himself up from that, but he was still dealing with a venomous snake, head reared and staring at him with glowing green eyes, its tongue flicked in and out as it waited for him to deliver himself to its venomous jaws. And he managed to have some powder that was a deterrent, and the snake slithered away. So he turns around, and Xiaolu is in front of this magnificent pillar, and he is walking towards it, and it has just a writhing column of snakes. The winding patterns on the pillar now became clear. What they had taken for intricate carvings were instead countless snakes coiled around the bronze surface. Some reared and flicked their tongues, while others twined around each other as they slithered in circles. Their scales glinted in the torchlight, sending shivers down Chubuchu's spine. Why spiders and snakes, author? Yeah, the snake pillar. Yet Xiaolu seemed completely oblivious as he approached the pillar. Xiaolu! Chubuchu rushed forward and felt his foot sink as he trod on a hidden trigger buried in the fissures on the ground. Hide, and Chubuchu's reactions were too slow to evade. The arrows were inches from them as he grabbed Xiaolu's arm. So he woke Xiaolu up from the illusion. Xiaolu was able to mostly dodge. And they collapsed on the ground in an ungainly heap. Xiaolu's breathing was heavy. It was clear he no longer had the strength to carry Chubuchu. I don't mind snakes personally, but that was way too many snakes. Agreed. Usually I'm okay with snakes. Like, we have a respectful position. You ignore me, I ignore you. We go about our lives. That sort of thing. But yeah, when it's that many snakes and that many snakes that are coming at me with malicious intent, it's like, no, thank you. And so then Chubuchu figures out kind of the secret of the diagram being the yellow river diagram, Chubuchu said. The array was likely modeled after it. Even if death lies everywhere, where death and life meet, There must be a path out. That's the secret. Closing his eyes, he recalled his vision of the jade of Heaven Lake. The fissures forming the jade had scattered and rearranged themselves into the shape of this diagram, an ancient cosmological map familiar to anyone who studied geomancy. I saw a hint within the illusion earlier. Those fissures look random, but if you took each out separately and rearranged them, they'd form the Yellow River diagram. Xiaolu was silent for a moment, then smiled dryly. You're better at arrays than I am. It seems Fan Yun held something back when he taught me. No, said Chubuchu. He treated you the same as he did me. If anything, you had his favor. He taught you more than me, not less. But your heart wasn't in it. Xiaolu was extraordinarily intelligent and capable, yet he was also ambitious. And ambitious individuals often shared a common flaw. They set their goals unreasonably high. For them, these arts were merely stepping stones. They felt no need to dedicate themselves to such pursuits, so they paid less attention. You're right, Xiaolu didn't deny it. What did you see when you looked at that pillar? Xiaolu paused. Everything I've ever wanted. Fame, power, an able body. Being born into a prosperous family, climbing the ranks on my own merits, seizing the throne and replacing the Emperor of Chen, governing across the Yangtze River from your Sioux, and finally achieving my goal of unifying the land. Your obsession runs too deep, said Chubuchu coldly. He had no interest in conversing further. When he felt somewhat recovered, he rose to observe his surroundings. The cave they had landed in was clean, but very small, with hardly any room to move around. One side was open and dropped down to the bronze dais. The remaining 3 sides were solid stone. One in particular was suspiciously smooth, suggesting it was the work of human excavation. Chubuchu crouched down, running his fingers along the base of the wall until he found a narrow crack that confirmed his suspicions. This wall wasn't naturally formed. It was a man-made stone door. Groping blindly, he located the trigger, a stone ball, which he pushed into the corner. With a rumble, the stone door slowly began to rise. Chubuchu realized his companion had gone still. Xiaolu, I fear I won't be leaving this place, Xiaolu said calmly. If I can, said Chubuchu, so can you. In this, at least, I'm not like you. The poison has seeped into my bones. Even the jade of Heaven Lake's essence I absorbed is useless. What will you do? I cannot escape death. Perhaps it's better if I pass the jade of Heaven Lake's essence on to you. You still have a glimmer of hope. The Xiaolu I knew would never give up until the final moment. For me, this is that final moment. Carrying you here exhausted the last of my strength. I can't even stand. My legs are numb. Xiaolu smiled. There's just one problem. My body is full of poison. I can't guarantee you won't be poisoned as well if I transfer the essence to you. Chubuchu frowned. Chubuchu, said Xiaolu, do you dare take a gamble? Okay, so that is where we ended it last night. And let me just write down the time, grab a sip, and we will get started on our last numbered chapter, which is very exciting to say because that means this is the end of the main storyline. All right. Chapter 187. When Xiaolu wished to, he could give anyone he spoke with the impression that they were bathed in a gentle spring breeze. He felt instantly familiar, like they'd found the other half of their soul. Even Chu was not immune. Xiao Lu was an extraordinarily proud man, unable to tolerate the slightest imperfection or flaw. Yet, ironically, the first half of his life had been filled with imperfections. He was born into a noble family, but their authority had waned. He was learned and knowledgeable, but found himself serving an incompetent emperor and unable to receive favor. His gifts were extraordinary. An exceptional memory and martial talent, the likes of which appeared once a century. But he was born with poison coursing through his veins, and though he possessed powerful internal cultivation, much of it was consumed, suppressing the toxins in his own body. His original plan had been to infiltrate the southern dynasty from within. It was his own territory, after all, and the Emperor of Chen was weak. The lines of power within the southern dynasty were tangled and interwoven, and thus easy to exploit. But the appearance of Yuan Yihuan had altered his view. At the time, the northern Shou dynasty was still thriving. As the daughter of the crown prince, the infant girl was destined to become an emperor's daughter. She'd been left for dead, but she was the twin sister of the crown prince's living child. Her status was both delicate and extremely useful. Xiao Le covertly gathered his forces and worked for years until he had finally created a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The 3 days of the Lantern Festival and the solar eclipse. Zhang Yi and Liu Feng's deaths. The massacre at the Prince of Qin's mansion. The Buddhist ceremony at Daxing Temple. The stars aligned. The right time, the right place, and the right people. His victory had seemed assured. Yet in just a few hours, everything had unraveled. Had Jubachu's group not obstructed him, had his co-conspirator, Kuhizen, not betrayed him, had he not pursued perfection and tried to eliminate the Emperor of Su first, perhaps he'd have succeeded in changing the world. But it was too late for what-ifs. Xiao Le had always understood that the path he walked was as steep as a 1,000-foot cliff. No other road was available to him. He had exhausted himself for years, plotting and planning, yet ultimately he hadn't been able to outrun his own death. The idea of changing one's fate was a joke. Xiao Le closed his eyes, seeing his whole life flit by in a blink. A sense of futility washed over him. I won't gamble, said Chubuchu. Xiao Lu smiled. You're afraid. Yes, I'm afraid, Chubuchu said flatly. He didn't explain, but Xiao Lu saw through him. Chubuchu, I thought you understood better than anyone how to seize the moment. You burn all paths of retreat in your resolve to press forward. Yet right now, cornered as you are, you refuse to take this step. Why? His question was met with silence. Xiaolu chuckled. You have attachments, considerations. You're afraid if you accept my proposal, you'll never leave here. And there's someone you still wish to see, isn't there? Chubuchu acted like he hadn't heard. Xiaolu, you often say we're alike. Indeed, our experiences and talents bear a great resemblance. You even both took Fan Yun as our teacher. But I have no desire to overturn the world or usurp the throne, and even less to gamble on a fleeting hope, he added coldly. If you still have the energy to say all this, get up and look for a way out. Xiaolu sighed. If there's hope, what does it matter if it's fleeting? Escaping this place will tax you beyond what you can bear. Without taking the chance I'm offering, you won't get far. The situation was indeed dire for Chubuchu. Although his expression remained placid and his tone moderate, was only because he was used to suppressing his pain. If not for the stone wall supporting him, he probably wouldn't have been able to sit up at all. Each exhale felt like he was breathing out fire, scorching his heart and lungs, and the cold, damp air of the cavern aggravated his agony. It was as if ice and fire were warring inside him. Chubuchu endured and endured, but eventually he could endure no longer. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Xiaolu narrowed his eyes. His sight was fading, but in the torchlight he could vaguely make out the crimson splatter on the ground. He still had enough left in him to tease Chubuchu. I didn't expect that after all our time fighting we'd end up dying together. Perhaps we'll meet again in the next life. Chubuchu sneered, but I don't want to see Pavilion Leader Xiao ever again. Please die a little further away so I may have peace. The flame in his hand flickered out, plunging them into darkness once more. Just before the light faded, Chubuchu saw what lay beyond the stone door. A corridor, its stone walls lined with candle holders. This, too, must belong to the labyrinth. If there were holders for candles, someone must have once used this path to cut through the maze. It might just lead them out, provided there were no traps along the way. He exhaled a breath of stale air. With great effort, he propped himself up onto his elbow, then slowly climbed to his feet. Even if Xiaolu couldn't move, Chubuchu had to keep going. Don't leave. Stay here with me, Xiaolu called out from behind him. His words were like an invisible shackle locking around Chubuchu's ankle and preventing him from taking another step. Chubuchu was exhausted. His broken body was strained to its limit, yet he had dragged it along, lingering at death's door year after year. It took enormous willpower simply to command his body to walk and talk, to force it to keep up with his mind. But it forever lagged behind, heavy and sluggish. Chubuchu, you're trying so hard to leave this place. If the person you want to see doesn't want to see you, what will you do? You've lived a life of agony. You spend your days lost in pain and suffering, and for what? You refuse to pursue the most glorious position for yourself. Why not die here with me? At least then I won't be lonely in the underworld. Behind him, Xiaolu hunched over, racked by coughs. He laughed as he coughed and coughed as he left. Chubuchu didn't look back or respond. He continued to inch forward, step by laborious step. He crossed the threshold of the stone door and entered the passageway. Darkness enveloped him, as if he'd fallen into a bottomless abyss or sunk into the depths of hell. Only the pain in his limbs reminded him that he was still alive. A soft wind blew across the back of his neck. Chubuchu couldn't evade as a cold hand gripped his throat. You don't wish to die with me, but I wish to die with you, Xiaolu murmured. He tapped Chubuchu's acupoint, and his hand slid down from his nape to press firmly against his back. Chubuchu, even if you refuse to gamble, I still want to make a wager with you. Chubuchu was unable to speak or move, unable to struggle. Cold, stagnant air washed over him, untouched by the sun for centuries. Yet as Xiaolu's hand pressed into his back, it felt as if he'd thrust a food. The amount of, sickness or dead things or just, germs that are probably in this place have got to be insane. Just a old strain of illness just waiting in the dust, and you kick it up, and all of a sudden there's super typhoid fever or something. I don't know. Anyway, I'm thinking not in a fantasy world setting, so sorry. His bones were instantly incinerated by the searing light. The clash between ice and fire, a relentless torment with no respite. A hook seemed to be stirring and clawing at his flesh, as if trying to tear him apart and rebuild him anew. Scalding waves of heat churned around him, yet failed to dissolve the bone-piercing chill. Neither side was willing to relent until the other was consumed, locked in a stalemate with Chubachu's body as the battlefield. Shark Princess, this is book 5. This is literally the last numbered chapter before we get to the extras. And as well as Welcome. Scalding wave, neither side was willing to relent until the other was consumed, locked in a stalemate with Chubachu's body as the battlefield. How could a mortal body withstand such torture? His was already painfully fragile, unable to weather such an intense shock. The slightest push, and it would splinter into thousands of pieces, never to be whole again. Chubachu forced his eyes open a crack and gazed vacantly into the void ahead. His lips parted as if to moan, but no sound escaped. When the pain reached its peak, his consciousness, his very soul, could no longer bear it. It struggled free of the confines of his body and started to rise toward the heavens. Just a little further, and he would be free. Never again would he be shackled by this suffering. Hantavirus or steroids, right? He'd taken revenge for his birth mother, and the Shuyui Bureau had Zhang Sun and Song Liang Chen. There was no need for him to regret or worry. This world was full of brilliant men. The court would surely find a new chief to take his place at the Shuyui Bureau. As for this case, his last, he and Xiao Le would be buried within the labyrinth forever, the corpses rotting and becoming one with the earth. In a few months, they'd be unrecognizable piles of bones, nameless and forgotten. All grievances and enmities would fade, vanishing like smoke. All obsessions were but illusions. A voice lingered in his ears, soft and poisonous. Wouldn't it be nice to stay here quietly? You'll have me as your opponent. You won't be lonely, even in the underworld. Chubachu felt as if he was walking in a daze, pulled along by an unseen guide. He passed under a stone gate and traversed a long corridor where time seemed to stand still. The agonizing sensations of burning heat and freezing ice evaporated, leaving his body weightless. Even the sensation of his feet pressing into the floor as he walked seemed to have faded away. He couldn't remember having ever felt so light and carefree. It was a feeling he scarcely dared to dream of. Chubachu had never imagined there'd come a time when he could feel like an ordinary person. No, he was even more comfortable than an ordinary person. If he kept going like this, it wouldn't be long before. Yet even as that force pulled him inexorably forward, he found himself resisting its tug. Something deep down, he felt like there was something he had forgotten, something of great importance. He looked around in confusion, then lowered his head again. Whatever it was, he couldn't recall it. The force continued to draw him onward, step by step. A nagging, anxious feeling bubbled up within him. What was it that he couldn't remember? Something slipped from his lapels and fell to the ground. Stone struck stone with a crisp, ringing sound, jolting his hazy mind back to clarity. It looked like a piece of jade. The recollection came to him sluggishly. One night, after returning to the capital, perhaps it had been during the Lantern Festival, he'd gone to the East Market for an appointment. He'd seen this piece of jade as he passed a shop and bought it on impulse. On the piece of jade was carved. He furrowed his brow, straining his memory for every detail. A phoenix. A phoenix had been vivid and bursting with life. The phoenix had been vivid and bursting with life. Its head proudly raised, ready to soar into the 9 heavens. When he looked at it, he felt it bore an uncanny resemblance to someone. Chubuchu trembled. He stopped, refusing to take another step, no matter how much the force tugged and pulled. There was something he'd yet to do. There was someone he needed to see. He couldn't leave. He didn't want to die. He wanted to live. With that thought, the tide of pain came rushing back in, crashing over him from all directions. It surged and roiled with no end in sight. In his half-conscious stupor, Chubuchu didn't notice the blood oozing from the corners of his mouth, nor the uncontrollable way his body shivered and twitched. He didn't notice that behind him, Xiaolu was now emaciated and gaunt, frail and gray-haired. His left hand on Chubuchu's back was no longer smooth and slender. It was wrinkled and withered, as starkly white as bone. A mouthful of blood splattered onto Chubuchu's shoulder. At last, Xiaolu loosened his grip and slumped to the one side. He didn't even have the strength to open his eyes and glance at the darkened world around him. He'd once believed he would never accept this. But now an uncanny tranquility enveloped him, as if all the dust of the mortal world had settled around him. An underground labyrinth for holding Buddhist sarira. At least it wasn't filthy and unclean. It was only a pity he had finally lost fate. Xiaolu's lips curled, pulling at the dried and shriveled skin of his face. The vitality he'd once possessed was gone, as if it had never been. Even those who knew him might not have recognized him. His gaze shifted from the distant empty void to Chubuchu before him. Chubuchu, I wish you luck. If you don't make it, come keep me company in death. We can duel to our heart's content in the underworld. Dazed, Chubuchu only vaguely heard him. He could no longer tell what was hallucination and what was reality, just as he couldn't tell if his spirit had left his body. Just as he couldn't tell if his spirit had left his body. He didn't know if he still remained in the mortal realm. A powerful force from the underworld yearned to tear his soul away. His spirit warred fiercely with his body, neither side willing to concede. He drifted in a strange and boundless darkness, clinging to his last shred of clarity as a shield against the outside forces that would take him. He fought them, inching step by step back down the path he'd come. He didn't know how much time passed before he gradually became aware that he was waking up in his flesh and blood body. The agony had grown more intense. This time, it wasn't just his body. His head also ached. He felt as if a hand had reached into a tranquil pond that was his mind and stirred. He let out a soft sigh. The sound traveled down the passageway, bouncing off the walls and echoing over and over. With great effort, he opened his eyes. All he saw was darkness. Yet he keenly sensed that there was no longer anyone beside him. There was no response. Before long, he heard the sound of hurried and erratic footsteps in the distance. This person was unsteady on their feet, stumbling as they ran, at times light and at other times lumbering. Who could it be? The Emperor of Su? Zhang Su? Or was it Kuhizen's human Gyu? It could also be Feng Xiao or Tuan Qinghe. Friend or foe, he lacked the strength to move even an inch. The footsteps drew near. The newcomer carried a light which bounced up and down in time with their steps. A moment later, it resolved into a blurred figure holding a torch. It was a girl. Chubachu frowned. In his confusion, he took her for Qiao Xian before remembering he had sent Qiao Xian away. She couldn't possibly be here. It wasn't Qiao Xian, nor was it Qin Miaoyu. Then who? He soon received his answer. The girl stopped, panting harshly in the dim light. Her beautiful and delicate features twisted with an incongruous savagery. A vertical gash marred her once lovely forehead, the edges curled outward like a wound inflicted by a knife. Blood trickled down the bridge of her nose, leaving rusty streaks where it dried. Her forehead around the wound seemed to pulse, as if some living thing lurked beneath her skin. I mean, that's a very high possibility at this point. Like, the Gyu monster is over there. Like, I know the knife slash, if this is who I think it is, was from Tuan Qinghe. But Yuan Yihuan stared blankly at Chubachu, then turned her gaze to the space beside him. Only then did Chubachu see Xiao Lu, silent and still. Xiao Long! Tears mixed with blood streamed from Yuan Yihuan's eyes. She fell to her knees and pulled Xiao Lu into her arms, unafraid of his withered and aged corpse. Why didn't you wait for me? The girl screamed silently. Her eyes shone with a lifetime's worth of sorrow. To her, Xiao Lu was everything. He was heaven and earth, the entire first half of her life. She'd been born into the imperial family, but never spent a single day as a princess. Princess Li Ping, Yuan Ying, Yuan Yun, the Emperor of Su, Empress Dugu. These people were all her closest blood kin, yet they couldn't have been more distant from her. Even when she'd followed Xiao Lu's orders to approach the princess and her daughter, Yuan Yihuan had never seen them as her true family. The only one she trusted unreservedly was Xiao Lu. He'd taught her to read and write, taught her martial arts and strategy. Although they called themselves siblings, had Xiao Lu asked her to strip and offer up her innocence to him, she'd have done it without hesitation. You remember how I said this author likes to put things bluntly? I mean, that's pretty blunt. Whew. Unfortunately, Xiao Lu had never asked for such a thing. There was no shortage of beautiful women around him, but all his energy was devoted to his grand plans. He probably paid more attention to his opponent, Chubachu, than to her. Now, his body would never be warm again. Yuan Yihuan's tears of blood ran dry. Slowly, she raised her head and glared at Chubachu. He returned her stare with indifference, unafraid. Xiaolong is dead, she said. So why are you still alive? She gently released Xiao Lu, then pulled a long worm from her brow. It was. Her empty hands stretched toward Chubachu, trailing down his neck and unfastening his collar with a feather-like touch. Look what you did to Xiao Lam. I won't let you die so easily. Your suffering should be greater than his. At least that way he'll have peace in the underworld. She used her nail to score a gash in the skin beneath Chubuchu's collarbone, then brought the worm close. It latched on eagerly, sucking at his blood in greedy gulps. She let go, and the worm darted into his flesh, leaving only a small strip of tail exposed. Soon enough, even that disappeared. Yuan Yihuan tore open Chubuchu's clothing and watched as the worm wiggled slowly beneath the skin of his chest, unable to suppress a smile. Next, I'll remove your heart. But don't worry. With the Gyu in you, you'll live for a while without it. Perhaps you'll get to feel what it's like to have no heart at all. Her tone was cool and deliberate as she slowly tugged open Chubuchu's garments, her expression almost reverent. Chubuchu felt like his body had been split into three. A third composed of the familiar pain of his original illness. A third, the martial essence Xiaolu had transferred into his body. And the final third, the Gyu tearing into his flesh. All three fought fiercely for dominance. None were willing to concede. Black blood oozed from Chubuchu's lips without cease. This poor man, like, not only is he going through all this stuff, but, like, now he's got a Gyu to contend with. His body was at his limit. He could endure no more. But Yuan Yihuan didn't seem to care how much pain he was in. The greater his pain, the happier she became. If Chubuchu had been able to speak and describe his current experience to her, she might have clapped in delight. She caressed his chest over his heart, searching for the opportune moment to strike. At last, her lips curled in satisfaction. She sliced open his chest over his sternum, then reached in to rip out his heart. A sword stabbed soundlessly toward her from behind. Yuan Yihuan froze, her heart pounding in alarm. The enemy had followed her down the passageway, but she'd only noticed when they were right at her back. This person was a martial artist on par with Xiaolu in his prime. It was her last thought before the sword pierced her through. Bewilderment filled Yuan Yihuan's eyes. From the moment she'd plucked the Gyu from the ground and welcomed it into her own body, she'd accepted her fate. She knew she was a middling martial artist, so she had to rely on the Gyu to help Xiaolu. As a vessel for the worm, she would die the most painful of deaths. But it didn't matter how awful her end would be. Yet her sacrifice had been in vain. By the time she found Xiaolu, he was already dead. The blood-stained blade was swiftly withdrawn. A kick sent Yuan Yihuan flying, and the blade drew a swift arc through the air. Crimson blood splattered the stone walls as her head parted from her body and rolled into the darkness. I still remember when the author just casually mentioned cannibalism. I mean, yeah, they're... yeah. Chubuchu felt an arm wrapped tightly around his waist. Distantly, he heard someone calling his name over and over, their voice laced with fear and urgency. He opened his eyes a crack and tried to speak, but only brought up a mouthful of blood. Above him, Feng Xiao's face came into focus. He was entirely changed. Had the arrogant Deputy Chief Feng ever made that kind of expression before? Chubuchu felt an urge to laugh. He managed to say, "Help me remove the Gyu." Feng Xiao's gaze was fixed on the pulsating movements beneath the skin of Chubuchu's chest. He gritted his teeth. "I fear I dare not." He didn't dare. Chubuchu wanted to laugh even more. The two options are life and death. That's all. He closed his eyes and said calmly, I entrust my life to you. I hold no grudges if I die. Feng Xiao's expression shifted, as if he was biting back something he wished to say. He lit a torch and drew a dagger from his sleeve. He held the tip in the flame, then pressed it to Chubuchu's chest. Still, he hesitated to make the cut. Oh, she definitely has no chill. Like, her chill, surprisingly, was Xiao Le, and then she walks in on his, like, desiccated corpse. I'm not surprised she lost her chill. Hurry. Chubuchu's body twitched as the Gyu burrowed deeper. He felt his awareness slipping. Feng Xiao dared not wait any longer. He trained his eyes on an undulating patch of skin and struck. A black dot wriggled within the streaming blood, trying to conceal itself. Feng Xiao grasped it firmly and pulled it out. Chubuchu's eyes snapped open at the burst of pain. His gaze was unfocused, his face ashen and drenched in sweat. Drenched, not dredged. Moving with extraordinary speed, Feng Xiao flung the worm into the torch's fire. Then he gathered Chubuchu into his arms and dashed away, leaving Yuan Yihuan's corpse behind. Chubuchu was hazily aware that Feng Xiao was carrying him while sprinting. The arms around him were steady, trying to minimize any jostling. The Feng heir he'd met a year ago in Liugong City would certainly not have shown him this much consideration. Chubuchu was rather touched. Feeling Chubuchu shift slightly, Feng Xiao seemed to think the poison was flaring up again. He screeched to a halt and lowered his head. "What's wrong?" he asked, anxious. "Nothing." As long as Chubuchu could endure the pain, he dismissed it. Feng Xiao smoothly set him down. "How did you find me?" Chubuchu asked. "I tracked Yuan Yihuan. That girl could have become an enormous problem if not eliminated. I didn't expect to find you with her." He and Tuan Qinghe had both ended up in the labyrinth. Feng Xiao chasing Yuan Yihuan, and Tuan Qinghe chasing Feng Xiao. They had fought again, but the collapse of the labyrinth had separated them. Feng Xiao had wandered around the altars and nearly perished several times. Fortunately, his incredible martial arts had allowed him to overcome each and every crisis. That's impressive because you have to realize that Xiao Le and Chubuchu both basically saved each other. I mean, Chubuchu saved himself, but Chubuchu did technically save Xiao Le from the snakes. So you have to realize the amount of fortitude or like mental strength that Feng Xiao has to have right now. Kind of crazy. At the same time, Zhang Sun had been fleeing the human Gyu with the Emperor in tow when they ran into Tuan Qinghe. The human Gyu had no power to differentiate between friend and foe. It didn't spare Tuan Qinghe simply because he was on Kuhizhen's side. After the monster's terrifying pursuit, the appearance of Tuan Qinghe had given Zhang Sun the chance to slip away. "I met with them just up ahead. Zhang Sun found an exit, so I had him take the Emperor out first while I came to look for you. Instead, I found Yuan Yihuan." Feng Xiao spoke quickly as he described what had happened. He glossed over all the dangers. He knew if he mentioned them, Chubuchu would ask more questions, and if Chubuchu asked, he had to answer. But he didn't want to waste any time. Chubuchu had seen many sides of Feng Xiao, but he had never seen him so panicked and flustered. "So Tuan Qinghe is still here and alive. Hopefully the human Gyu catches up to him and they destroy each other. But if he never appears before me, best if he never appears before me again." Chubuchu gave a small smile. I fear your wish won't come true. A man had appeared at the entrance of the passage. The lantern in his hand swayed as he steadily made his way closer. If Tuan Chinghe could perish at the hands of human Yu, he wouldn't have deserved his reputation. Feng Xiao sighed. Ah, so persistent. But he didn't rush to confront this new adversary. Instead, he pulled out a jade pendant and held it in front of Chubuchu. You dropped this. Chubuchu glanced at the phoenix carved into the jade. He shook his head. It's not mine. Then whose is it? Perhaps it was you and Yi Huan's, said Chubuchu flatly. Feng Xiao was so angry he left. Would it kill you to speak the truth just once? Well, said Chubuchu, maybe. I really am about to die. Oh, these two. I'm going to mark that down for shameless, because even as he's dying, he's still lying about his affection. So I will read off the other counters at the end of the chapter, but I'm just going to do the shamelessness counter right now. 100, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 46. So I don't know if we're going to reach 200, but let's see if we can reach 150. In that case, you better still be alive to talk to me when I return. Oh, hang on. Well, said Chubuchu, maybe I really am about to die. Feng Xiao froze. Chubuchu took the opportunity to change the subject. However, if you defeat Tuan Chinghe, perhaps I'll tell you the truth you wish to hear. In that case, you better still be alive to talk to me when I return. I'll do my best, Chubuchu said sincerely. Meng Xiao lowered his head to kiss him, and this time Chubuchu didn't resist. Perhaps he'd exhausted all his energy. He simply leaned against the stone wall for support, raised like really right in front of my salad moment. 47. After a moment, they parted. Feng Xiao tucked away the jade pendant and strode toward Tuan Chinghe. Chubuchu watched him go, then slowly closed his eyes. Tuan Chinghe hadn't moved. He bent and set the lantern on the floor. If possible, I wish our battle to take place above ground. Feng Xiao rolled his eyes. You think I want to fight down here? Tuan Chinghe gave him a serious nod. Since this battle is unavoidable, let victory depend. Gave him a serious nod. Since this battle is unavoidable, let victory depend on our skills. Doesn't it always? I'm just saying. Feng Xiao snorted. Then he dashed toward Tuan Chinghe, swift as lightning. In an instant, their figures intertwined, one wielding a saber, the other zither strings. Tuan Chinghe's dazzling saber glare rolled out and engulfed his opponent. Feng Xiao's sleeves billowed. He looked vulnerable, even frail, surrounded by the saber chi's tremendous might, as if he might collapse at any moment. But then the string shot out from his sleeves and shattered the saber chi. Tuan Chinghe changed tactics. He leapt into the air and swung his sword away again, and his saber glare descended like roiling thunderclouds. Got a lot of them here today. Feng Xiao unsheathed the whip sword at his waist. With a flick of his wrist, he infused the thin, flexible blade with true chi. It turned cold and hard, swathed in a chilling aura. The saber glare closed in, relentless as a fierce tiger leaping down from the mountains to catch its prey. Its chi swelled like thunderclouds, low on the horizon, rolling in to crush all of heaven and earth. Even Chuba Chu could feel the dense sweep of bloodlust from where he was sitting. Endless and indefatigable? Defatigable? It sent a chill shivering through him. He'd never witnessed the splendid martial arts of Hulagu before he died, but he'd heard Fan Yun speak of them. Fan Yun had even demonstrated a couple of moves for him. Well, the imitation couldn't hold a candle to the original. It had been enough for Chuba Chu to glimpse the deadly and overwhelming power of the foremost master of his day. I'm going to look that up because usually I can guess at words, but like that one, like it's obvious what it means, but endless and indefatigable. It's a weird word. Indefatigable. Indefatigable describes someone who is untiring, relentless, and capable of working or persisting for long periods without ever giving in to fatigue. Indefatigable. Showing sustained enthusiastic action with unflagging vitality. Man, this author just pulls them out like the thesaurus. Impressive. Okay. Sorry for the slight pause. Tuan Qinghe, who had never set foot in the Central Plains, displayed a martial style inspired by Hulagu's, yet also distinctly his own. He'd spent years training in the snowy mountains of his homeland. All he thought of and cared about was martial arts, and this unadulterated devotion to his craft lent his skills an incredible purity. Though he lacked Hulagu's crushing power, his moves had an almost transcendental quality. Given enough time, he was certain to surpass Hulagu and become a grandmaster of his generation. But that was a tale for the far future. Today, the opponent in front of him was in no way his inferior. Though Feng Xiao rarely set foot in the Jianghu, he too was a gifted genius. Only recently, he'd survived a chi deviation and taken his martial arts to new heights. Yet this pulse-pounding, tumultuous battle had no witness other than Chu Chu. It was a pity, to say the least. In its own way. Even Feng Xiao wasn't sure he could prevail. He and Tuan Qinghe were almost equal in strength. They had the same odds of winning. Any tiny, imperceptible mistake would mean defeat. But he couldn't afford to lose, because there was someone behind him. The tidal wave of saber glares crashed over Feng Xiao, who stood unmoving. He didn't rush to dodge or counter. He didn't yet know his opponent's whereabouts. A sea of saber glares engulfed his vision, most of them mere after-images. But the real saber glares were hidden within the fakes, and if he failed to distinguish them, he might find the next slash scored into his flesh. Feng Xiao leapt into the air. He swung his sword, and his blade and body became one. Together, he and the sword pierced through the saber glares. The passageway exploded with light. Two figures parted in midair and landed on protruding rocks in the cliff face. A long gash stretched from Tuan Qinghe's right shoulder to the left side of his abdomen, weeping blood. Feng Xiao's arm was a mass of cuts beneath a crimson-soaked sleeve. Both their faces had paled. They were both suffering from more than trivial injuries. If they had continued, they would continue to wound each other. If they continued, they would continue to wound each other like this until they both died together. It was the only possible conclusion. Yeah, now that you mention it, I also wonder what the original word was in Chinese, Truffle. Feng Xiao didn't want to die here. He still had to bring Chu out of the labyrinth, but he didn't say so out loud. Instead, he said, "Your heart is elsewhere. It's not in this battle." Tuan Qinghe's eyes widened. It seemed Feng Xiao had hit the mark. Why don't we postpone this fight to another day? His opponent seemed to consider this. When? 3 years from today. In 3 years, I'll meet you at Jin Peak on Mount Emi. Emiya. Emi. No, I think it is Emi. Tuan Qinghe turned and left. His only answer. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished into the darkness. It had been obvious something was worrying him. Even now, he was in a desperate hurry. He didn't even bother to stanch his bleeding. Feng Xiao slanted a glance at the spot where Tuan Qinghe had been standing earlier. Yuan Yihuan's corpse still lay sprawled on the ground nearby, and in an instant Feng Xiao understood. But he had no time to consider it. He strode quickly over to Chu and then bent down, helping him up as gently as possible. He couldn't resist brushing a hand over Chu's chest. When he felt a faint flutter of warmth there, he unconsciously relaxed. "I'll carry you out, all right," he whispered. Chu twitched. He glanced at Feng Xiao before closing his eyes once more and nodding. Feng Xiao pulled Chu onto his back. He started to walk, pausing after each step. His progress was slow, but steady. "Promise me you'll still be awake when we leave the labyrinth." A moment passed, or perhaps it was many moments. Finally, Feng Xiao heard a faint sigh from behind him. "I promise." Chu didn't make promises easily, and when he did, he always kept them. But Feng Xiao felt no relief. Instead, he grew even more tense. No one understood Chu's desire to survive better than Feng Xiao. Yet there was also no one who better understood the extent of his injuries. Even if Chu wanted to live, how could his body possibly weather such severe harm? Feng Xiao could seek out the best physicians in the world, but Chu first had to make it out of the labyrinth. "If you keep your promise," Feng Xiao said, "I'll tell you something." Chu, I like you. If you live, I'll deign to stay by your side for a lifetime. If you die, even if the Shuyui Bureau buries you, I will dig up your grave and scatter your bones. I will ensure your soul cannot rest and will never reincarnate. Feng Xiao's voice was icy, cold enough to freeze a person solid. Yet Chu smiled. Whether it was the martial power Shaolu had transferred, the essence of the Jade of Heaven Lake, or the two poisons neutralizing each other within his body, he'd already persevered through the greatest agony. The pain was no longer so unbearable. But he had no intention of telling Feng Xiao just yet. He'd been given the chance to admire Deputy Chief Feng's confession and submission, so of course he would take it. At most, once they escaped from here, he'd forego setting a trap for him just this once. That was good enough. End of main story. And yes, I will add another shamelessness count to that, because that was pretty damn shameless what Chu just did. And then we've got all the other epilogues. All right. All right. Epilogue 1. It was destined to be a long night in the capital. Wind and rain darkened the sky, and countless people tossed and turned in their beds, unable to sleep. Hello, Esper Lady. We literally just started the epilogue. So we just finished the ending. And, oh yes, I forgot to add the shamelessness counter. 148. Yeah. No. I'll quickly run through before I start epilogue. Injustice to service workers is sitting at a 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. The justice to service workers still sitting at a sad 5. Injustice to animals and plants is sitting at a thankfully low 6. Our justice to animals is sitting at a very sad 4. Our injustice to innocence is sitting at a 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 29, with only a half justice to innocence. Our injustice to paging individually sitting at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 28. Our injustice to readers is sitting at 4. And as I said, our shamelessness counter is sitting at 148. And yes, you are welcome for the update. But yes. Okay, let's get started. Epilogue 1. It was destined to be a long night in the capital. Wind and rain darkened the sky, and countless people tossed and turned in their beds, unable to sleep. I like how his love confession is, I'm doing you a favor by liking you. Very much so. From time to time, they glanced out the windows, anxiously awaiting the arrival of dawn. The interior of the palace was brightly lit. Candle after candle lined the floors of its pavilion until the buildings were almost as bright as the sky itself. The attendants serving through the night rushed in and out of the palace, their faces grave. Not far from the palace, in the heart of the city, the interior of Da Xingshan Temple was in chaos. With Zhang Sun's support, the Emperor of Su climbed out of a dry well on the temple grounds covered in dirt and dust. It had never occurred to anyone that the well behind the temple, hidden among the trees, was yet another entrance to the underground labyrinth. The well had been dry for as long as the monks could remember, and it had been sealed with a heavy stone years ago to ensure that no one fell in by accident. Without Zhang Sun Bodhi's assistance, the emperor would never have clambered up to call for help. Even if he had, it was doubtful someone would have heard him in the confusion. Had Xiao Le been there, even he would have lamented that the Emperor of Su shouldn't suffer such an inglomerous end in death as at the bottom of a well. Oh, is that by your house? Unfortunately, despite possessing talent great enough to shake the world, and despite the charisma that had drawn so many experts to his shadow court, Xiao Le had met his own end in the dark. With Xiao Le and Yuan Yihuan dead, the remainder of the 13 floors of Yunhai's forces collapsed like a house of cards. Yu Xiu had died back on Mount Tiannan, and Fan Yun's loyalties lay elsewhere. As for Yuan Sanxi, he'd narrowly escaped, but even if he managed to keep his life, he'd find it difficult to make further trouble. The dust had settled, though many had paid far too steep a price. Da Xingshan Temple was in a state of complete disorder. Kuhi Zhen had laced the ginger soup with Gu, causing the officials and imperial guards to turn on each other in a vicious battle. By the time the Empress arrived with reinforcements, there was already numerous casualties. The Emperor of Su was still blinking in the lantern light when he saw the Empress rushing towards him. "Your Majesty!" she cried. The Emperor was momentarily stunned, then threw all courtesy to the wind and rushed toward her as well. He embraced her tightly, tears in his eyes. The two had been inseparable since they'd come of age, then spent years under the suspicion of Yuan Yang and his son. Yang Jian had woken up every day on pins and needles, fearful for his family's safety. If not for Empress Dugu's strength and support, uplifting him in his moments of weakness and solidifying his resolve, there might be no Emperor of Su today. After escaping the horrors of the labyrinth, the sight of his beloved wife felt like something from a dream. His eyes went red at the rims, and he yearned to tell her everything about his terrifying experiences underground. But even now, he remembered his position and responsibilities. He swallowed his words and started with the practicalities. Why has the Empress come? Where are the others? The second question was addressed to Yu Qingzi, who was hurrying over. Empress Dugu gestured for the general to speak first. Your Majesty, please don't worry, Yu Qingzi replied. The situation is under control. I, along with Qin Yangzi from the Jijian Bureau, used medicinal herbs such as mugwort and calamus to expel the impurities. The poison has been largely eliminated. However, according to the imperial physicians, some will require further treatment. The casualties are still being tallied. I ask that your Majesty return to the palace for your own safety. Ugh, that's the worst. The Emperor nodded. He saw the Empress preparing to speak, and raising a hand to stop her, turned to Zhang Sun Bodhi, whose anxiety was palpable. Is Chu Xiansheng still below? You should go find him. Yu Qingzi can send men to accompany you. Zhang Sun Bodhi accepted without demur. He cupped his hands to the Emperor in thanks and promptly disappeared back down the well with Yu Qingzi and his men to begin his search. The Emperor turned to the Empress, naked joy shining on his face. It seems the Empress is feeling better. Empress Dugu sighed. I wasn't ill, Your Majesty. I was poisoned. The Emperor was taken aback. Poison? When were you poisoned? Li Hua came to the palace and confessed everything. You remember that Ying was originally a twin? The other child was weak and mistaken for dead when she was born. She was taken out of the palace for burial, but miraculously survived. The leader of the 13 floors of Yunhai took her in as his sworn sister and gave her the name Yuan Yihuan. When she was grown, she secretly returned to find her family. Li Hua was moved by compassion at seeing her lost daughter, and her mistake led to all the trouble now. Chubuchu and Feng Xiao had deducted all this by now, but it was the first time the Emperor was hearing it. His brows shot up in shock. During Yuan Ying's recent birthday banquet, I couldn't bear to refuse Li Hua's request for me to visit the princess's residence, Empress Dugu continued. Surely your Majesty recalls. Empress Dugu continued. The Emperor nodded and she pressed on. I only learned much later that when I returned to the palace with my maids, one of them had been replaced with Yuan Yihuan's. She had no other way to infiltrate the palace, so she tricked me into bringing her servant in myself. She took the chance to poison my meals, and as the days passed, I fell ill. Thank heavens, Li Hua saw sense and came to me before it was too late. She revealed everything and gave me an antidote she stole from Yuan Yihuan. Well, I mean, she probably just saved the rest of her family line by doing so. Like, let's be real. He very much so is a wife guy. As the emperor was hearing these shocking revelations, Ming Yue was bringing men to surround Ku Hizhen's residence. The manor was a gift from the emperor, its size and design befitting an imperial prince. Yet the large complex was deathly silent, its residents seemingly oblivious to the troops at the gates. It was impossible to believe that everyone inside, Ku Hizhen included, could manage to sleep at a time like this. Ming Yue raised his hand. The troops at his back charged, ramming the gates and rushing in. Ming Yue followed closely after. Yet, once inside, everyone stopped in their tracks, shock scrawled over their faces. The courtyard before the main hall was strewn with bodies. All the staff sent by the emperor and Ku Hizhen's own followers, Han and Gokturk alike, lay on the ground. Some had collapsed with their eyes wide open, their faces frozen in expressions of terror, as if they had died of fright. Ming Yue was the first to react. He shook off his stupor and rushed into the hall. It was empty. The side hall, main courtyard, main house, they were all empty. Had Ku Hizhen realized the game was up and abandoned his people to flee? Ming Yue clung to a last thread of hope as he went from room to room until he finally flung open the door of the woodshed. Here at last he found the person he sought, if he could be called a person anymore. Ku Hizhen was sprawled on his back amid the firewood, his body covered in blood. His arms, legs, and face were riddled with holes, like rotten wood insects had drilled through them. If not for his clothes and stature, he would have been unidentifiable. Ming Yue's scalp went numb with terror, and he dared not take another step forward. The seventh prince of the Gokturks, Ku Hizhen, Razor of Gyu, had succumbed to his own poison's backlash and met his horrific end. A chill swept down Ming Yue's back. Though he sensed no murderous intent, his instincts kicked in. He sidestepped and turned to face his opponent. Silhouetted in the doorway of the shed was Tuan Qinghe, who should have been at Da Xingshan Temple, intercepting Feng Xiao and the others. Ming Yue's heart went cold. If it came to one-on-one combat, he was no match for this man. I think there's a saying like he tripped on his own halberd, so tripped on his own sword. I mean, he knew it was coming, but that's still intense. All right. Epilogue 2. But Tuan Qinghe made no move to attack. He took 2 steps inside. Ming Yue unthinkably made way to let him enter. Tuan Qinghe walked straight over to Ku Hizhen's corpse and crouched down. Disregarding the Gyu swarming over the corpse, he reached out to touch Ku Hizhen's face. Oh, that's an image. Ming Yue almost yelled at him to stop, yet as he watched, he found himself stunned into silence. The Gyu didn't leap toward Tuan Qinghe as expected. Instead, they wriggled away, evading him like he was a scorpion. Tuan Qinghe showed none of the expected shock, nor did he direct his anger at Ming Yue. He merely brushed his hand over Kuhizen's eyelids. The seventh prince's most celebrated feature had always been his deep blue eyes. Upon his arrival in the Sioux capital, his handsome face and beautiful eyes had drawn much attention. The people of the Central Plains looked down on him in public for his Gokturk lineage, yet that didn't stop them from admiring him in private. Now his eyes and face were an unrecognizable horror. But when Ming Yue saw Tuan Qinghe bend to pick Kuhizen up, he couldn't stop himself from crying out, "No!" Tuan Qinghe looked at him calmly, murder glinting in his gaze. Ming Yue was a top-tier marshal and afraid of fighting Tuan Qinghe, but Tuan Qinghe's bloodlust was so palpable he was shaken. "He's covered in those gew worms," he tried to explain. "Maybe they won't harm you, but if you take him out of here, the gew will go everywhere. Innocent people will be harmed." He paused. "It may be a Gokturk, but all martial artists strive to free their hearts from attachments. Surely you don't wish to stain your hands with such a terrible deed." Tuan Qinghe stared silently at Kuhizen's corpse. For a long time, he said nothing. Kuhizen had always been particular about cleanliness. The Gokturks were nomadic. Even their nobles found it difficult to be as stringent in this regard as their Central Plains counterparts. But perhaps due to his mixed heritage, Kuhizen was different. He'd been sensitive about it since childhood. Whenever his brothers threw mud at him and stained his clothes, he'd silently cry for hours. On one occasion, Kuhizen had hidden himself in a secluded cave to sob. Tuan Qinghe, who had happened to be training there, became irate at the child for interrupting him. This was their first meeting. Oh, we're going to learn how Tuan Qinghe met Kuhizen. Oh, no worries, Truffle. Have a good rest of your night. I hope you enjoy the rest later. See you for copper coins next week! As they grew older, Kuhizen had established himself in the upper echelons of Gokturk society and was apprenticed under the tribe's shaman. He'd learned to bury his emotions, but with his longtime friend Kuhizen, he'd showed something of his old self. Tuan Qinghe didn't approve of Kuhizen's unscrupulous methods, but the prince had chosen his path, and there was no turning back. Kuhizen had taken that road. So be it. Given Kuhizen's love of cleanliness, he'd surely have hated the idea of being consumed by filthy worms after his death. Tuan Qinghe went to grab more firewood from a corner in the kitchen and piled it around Kuhizen's body. Ming Yue was momentarily taken aback at how cooperative Tuan Qinghe was being. He rushed to help. A makeshift pyre swiftly took shape. Without further ado, Tuan Qinghe lit a torch and topped it onto the woodpile. The flame sparked and sputtered, rapidly spreading as the fire roared to life. Soon, not only the shed, but the entire kitchen was engulfed. The two men retreated outside to watch. Meng Yue clapped his hands in gratitude. "Thank you for your understanding, Tuan Qinghe Xianqing. I didn't do it for you." I know," said Ming Yue. "It doesn't matter what your reasons are. As long as the outcome benefits the common people, it's still a meritorious deed. So thank you." He performed a deep bow. "Go get a box," Tuan Qinghe said. Ming Yue started, but quickly realized what Tuan Qinghe intended. He went into the house and found a clean box of appropriate size then lined it with velvet. By the time the fire burned down to embers, it was approaching noon. The charred black walls of the kitchen emitted an unpleasant odor. Both Ming Yue and Tuan Qinghe had been standing there since dawn. Tuan Qinghe entered the smoldering woodshed, where he picked up the charred remains piece by piece and placed them in a box. Ming Yue didn't offer to help. He sensed Tu and Qinghe wouldn't appreciate his intervention. Once all the bones were collected, Tu and Qinghe turned and left with the box. As the Imperial Guard stepped forward to stop him, Ming Yue raised a hand. Even if they all attacked Tu and Qinghe together, they had no chance of victory. Box in hand, Tu and Qinghe departed the Seventh Prince's residence, disappearing with a few swift leaps into the vast blue sky. Barring any further upheaval, he would return to the Khaganate to lay his old friend to rest. Ming Yue breathed a sigh of relief. He knew nothing of Tu and Qinghe's pact with Feng Xiao, but even if he had, he wouldn't have tried to stop him. A city had just begun to settle. They had to fight a formidable adversary like Tu and Qinghe now. Peace would come at an even steeper price. Zhang Sun, Yu Qingzi, and their men descended into the dry well. Not far from their starting point, they came across a fork in the passageway. Zhang Sun pointed them down the side he had yet to explore. If Chu was down the other, Zhang Sun would have run into him on his way out. That's smart. The second passageway was deeper and narrower. Echoes rebounded off the walls and funneled into their ears. Zhang Sun and Yu Qingzi were unaffected, but the soldiers behind them grew anxious. Though they stepped as lightly as possible, they could hear a constant rustling echo, as if some creature were sweeping after them. At the end of the passage, a magnificent bronze dais rose up before them. Oh no, the snakes! The snakes! Everyone gazed at the dais in awe. They had no idea the traps had already been triggered by Chu and Xiao Le. If not, Zhang Sun Bodhi probably would have been the only one to emerge alive. Zhang Sun was the first to spot the cave above the platform. He leapt up and stumbled upon the bodies of Xiao Le and Yuan Yihuan. If they were dead here, there was a chance Chu had escaped. Zhang Sun didn't stop to think. He instructed Yu Qingzi to lead the others out the way they had come and dashed back through the cave. Halfway down the passage, a blast of wind gusted toward him. He countered reflexively, only to discover that his opponent's internal cultivation far surpassed his own. Their palms met, and Zhang Sun staggered back, blood roiling in his chest. You? His opponent withdrew his hand. Feng Xiao's face came into view. His freshly bald head was inconspicuous in the lantern light, but even more striking was his disheveled appearance. The normally fastidious Deputy Chief Fang was covered in dust. Though it didn't obscure his handsome features, the novelty of the sight shocked Zhang Sun Bodhi speechless. As Feng Xiao shifted, Chu came into view on his back. Lord Chief! Chu slumped wearily against Feng Xiao's shoulder. His eyes were tightly shut. It was impossible to tell whether he was dead or alive. Zhang Sun's heart thudded. He stepped forward to take Chu, but Feng Xiao held up a hand. He's fine. Feng Xiao's voice was hoarse. He'd been down in the stale air of the labyrinth too long. I examined him earlier. His breathing is weak, but stable. Let's bring him out before anything else. Zhang Sun pursed his lips. Thank you, Deputy Chief Fang. Allow me to carry him. No need. Feng Xiao raised a chin. Lead the way. Zhang Sun nodded and said no more. He turned and led them back the way he'd come. The journey was almost bizarrely uneventful, and the three of them quickly exited the sunless labyrinth. When the first rays of light hit him, Feng Xiao thought the sun had never felt so good before. When the first rays of light hit him, Feng Xiao thought the sun had never felt so good before. Even better was this. He and Chu were both alive. That is good. Now that they were out, Zhang Sun thought he could finally retrieve his superior. He silently held out his arms. But instead of handing Chubuchu over, Feng Xiao said, I'll take him back to the Jijian Bureau and have a doctor look him over there. This time, Zhang Sun Bodhi objected. Thank you for your kindness, Deputy Chief Feng, but the Empress has sent an imperial physician to the Shuoyue Bureau. He's waiting to treat the Lord Chief now. Feng Xiao didn't wait to be invited. I'm sorry, I don't know why my face is so itchy today. Then let's go back to the Shuoyue Bureau. Before Zhang Sun could respond, Feng Xiao had ordered someone to bring him a horse. He helped Chubuchu into the saddle first, then mounted behind him and swiftly galloped off. Zhang Sun Bodhi was left speechless, and that's another shameless, getting us to 49. And 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Though Xiaolu had given Chubuchu the jade of Heaven Lake's essence, it had entered his body along with Xiaolu's old poison. Fighting poison with poison wasn't recommended. Physicians considered it a treatment of last resort. But for someone like Chubuchu, ravaged by chronic illness, the pain was hardly worth mentioning. Chubuchu remained unconscious for a full 3 days and nights. At times, his breathing grew shallow and his pulse weakened. It was only thanks to everyone's vigilant observation and timely infusions of true qi that he passed safely through the danger. On the 3rd day, he finally opened his eyes. Upon seeing the bald head by his bedside, his first thought was he was still at Daxing Temple, but he quickly recognized Feng Xiao. It seemed a beauty would always be a beauty regardless of his hairstyle, or lack thereof. After staring at Feng Xiao's bare head for a while, Chubuchu found it had an esoteric elegance. It helped that Deputy Chief Feng seemed to have thrown himself wholeheartedly into the act. He was dressed in a plain white monk's robe, which enhanced his aura of ethereal untouchability. Of course, that was only if he kept his mouth shut. But this was asking the impossible. The moment Chubuchu shifted, Feng Xiao's eyes, which had been trained on the flowers outside the window, fixed upon his face. How I sleep? Chubuchu asked, his voice so hoarse as to be almost unrecognizable. Feng Xiao pursed his lips and suppressed a sigh of relief. He quietly poured a cup of warm water, then supported Chubuchu so he could drink. Even the imperial physician had been helpless to alleviate Chubuchu's suffering. There was no medicine he could prescribe. All anyone could do was take turns combating the poison with true qi when it flared up. Yet the treatment they'd devised had worked. That Chubuchu had awakened at all was a great fortune among a sea of misfortunes. After surviving this tribulation, he might still not live to a ripe old age, but he'd no longer be on the verge of death. 3 days, Feng Xiao said at last. Chubuchu felt as if half a lifetime had passed, yet it had only been 3 days. How fortunate. Now that you've seen me, Feng Xiao said deliberately, don't you have something to say? Chubuchu looked at him in confusion, as if he had no earthly idea of what he was talking about. Feng Xiao was instantly suspicious. Chubuchu possessed an addictive memory. He couldn't possibly have forgotten. At the same time, he'd been on death's door during the conversation. Perhaps he'd taken it for a dream or hallucination to be forgotten upon waking. In the cave, while I was carrying you, the things we talked about. Deputy Chief Fang was as arrogant as an immortal in the clouds, looking down on the people below. His tone carried a hint of magnanimous bafflement. Could Chief Chu have truly forgotten every word? Chubu Chu pretended to be intently trying to recall what had happened. I remember you said I wasn't allowed to die. And then, Feng Xiao asked coolly. That's all, Chubu Chu said innocently. Feng Xiao sneered. Good, wonderful, excellent. Each word was heavy with sarcasm. Chubu Chu, he said savagely. Let me say this. I'll never look at you again for as long as you live, even if you beg. Then he saw Chubu Chu smile. Feng Xiao had never seen Chubu Chu smile like that before. Serene and genuine, without any hint of mockery. It was the joy of someone who'd struggled through innumerable tribulations, traversing fire and ice to be greeted at last with paradise. To live and see you again is a wonderful thing, Chubu Chu said. Feng Xiao's heart instantly softened. And we have reached 150! Do. We still have 2 epilogues and a bonus story. Yay! Okay. 137.30. Epilogue 3. The 4th year of the Kai Huang era began as a tumultuous one. Before even the first month had passed, the capital was rocked by a series of strange events. The Prince of Qin's banquet on the night of the Lantern Festival, a series of strange events. The Prince of Qin's banquet on the night of the Lantern Festival, followed by the uproar at Da Xingshan Temple, were enough to leave people reeling. In the days that followed, the news that the 7th Prince's residence had been confiscated for investigation and that Princess Li Ping had been reprimanded and ordered to reflect in solitude barely raised a ripple. But despite the year's explosive beginnings, the city ultimately settled back into peace. Arrangements were made for the casualties, and Da Xingshan Temple was temporarily closed for repairs. The Empress's health had greatly improved. The Crown Prince and the Prince of Jin were well on their way to recovery, and Chubu Chu had woken from his coma and grew stronger every day. Soon he'd be able to walk and enjoy the sun in the courtyard. Everything was going well. The only flaw in all this loveliness was the matter of Deputy Chief Fang's hair. There were thousands of beauties in the world of all different types, yet even among those, Deputy Chief Fang stood out. Perhaps beauty was too effeminate a word. Feng Xiao's appearance wasn't effeminate in the least. He was stunningly handsome. Yet when one's handsomeness reached an extreme, it too became a kind of beauty. A true beauty would remain beautiful regardless of how they wore their hair. It didn't matter if they were bald or had long hair, or even if their hair was as stringy as weeds. At first, this was Feng Er's attitude as well. He donned Buddhist robes and played at being a monk. Those who didn't know him mistook him for a young devotee who had left his temple to wander the world. But as spring yielded to summer, he realized that having no hair was rather inconvenient. Firstly, his head was always cold, a sensation he found generally unpleasant. Secondly, hair was ugliest not when it was absent, nor when it was long, but during the in-between stage when it was just starting to grow out. Neither long nor short, the stubble pricked Feng Xiao every time he touched his head out of habit. When he looked in the mirror, Feng Xiao found himself gripped by a rare moment of self-doubt. Recently, Chubuchu had grown somewhat aloof toward Feng Xiao. Likewise, the Shuoyue Bureau seemed distant when they dealt with the Jijian Bureau, businesslike and lukewarm. Feng Xiao knew Chubuchu was fond of his face, even if he never said so. This fondness rarely showed itself openly, but Feng Xiao was certain of it. A person's eyes never lied. After all, who didn't love beauty? Even enlightened monks might not escape its hold. Feng Yer didn't waste his time wondering whether Chubuchu loved him for his face or his mind, because it was a stupid question. Both his face and mind were part of him. Feng Xiao firmly believed that even if someone with his exact same face showed up, Chubuchu's heart wouldn't be swayed. Any such person would lack Feng Xiao's unrivaled exact same face showed up. Chubuchu's heart wouldn't be swayed. Any such person would lack Feng Xiao's unrivaled soul. Only by combining the two would he get the peerless, one-of-a-kind man known as Feng Xiao. All right, so that's like 3 shameless right there, like at least. Just from like, I believe even if I was bald, I'm still going to be gorgeous, which not saying it's not true, like, but his attitude towards it. The statement about how even if they had the same face, it would be a stupid question. So that's 2, so 52. And by calling himself, only by combining the two would you get the peerless, one-of-a-kind man known as Feng Xiao. That's pretty shameless. 53. There we go. Yet this made Chubuchu's recent aloofness all the more perplexing. Feng Xiao felt that personally interrogating Chubuchu would make him appear overly concerned, so he arranged for Qin Miaoyu to deliver holiday gifts as an excuse to drop by. When Feng Xiao first brought Qin Miaoyu on as his subordinate, Feng Xiao had only valued her skill with fragrances. He'd never anticipated she would so accurately live up to her name. Clever speech. Qin Miaoyu was quick-witted and astute. The only people in the Jijian Bureau who knew about him and Chubuchu were her and Ming Yue, but Ming Yue was a simple and honest man, plain-spoken to a fault. Feng Xiao had little hope for him. Qin Miaoyu, on the contrary, was adept at observing others and providing a fair amount of assistance. Feng Xiao knew she wished to remain in the capital, so he went with the flow and let her stay. Besides, she made great contributions during the Lantern Festival incidents. This time, however, even Qin Miaoyu returned defeated. Her expression was a little odd as she gazed at Feng Xiao. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. "Spit it out," said Feng Xiao, irritated. "I didn't see Chief Chu," said Qin Miaoyu. "It seems the Shuoyue Bureau has taken a new case from the Ministry of Justice. His esteemed self wasn't free to meet with me." Feng Xiao's expression screamed, "You're completely useless." Indignant, Qin Miaoyu continued, "But I did hear some news your lordship may want to know, which is why I came back. Chief Chu visited the palace 2 days ago. Empress Dugu wishes to arrange a marriage between you and Princess Lan Ling and asked him to ascertain your opinion." Throughout history, marrying into the royal family had been the greatest of honors. For ministers, it was an enormous boost to their own status and authority, not to mention elevating that of their future descendants. But both the Empress and Emperor knew that these boons were likely of little use to Feng Xiao and Chubuchu. Neither was the type to bow down to power and wealth. Forcing a marriage upon them might end up driving them away instead. Empress Dugu admired Feng Xiao, but admiring him from afar and wanting him as her son-in-law were two different things. She was a sensible person with a good read on Feng Xiao's character. She knew he was unlikely to submit to a conferral of marriage. Forcing him would only put the princess's happiness at risk. Yet she couldn't resist her daughter's pleas, and so had resorted to asking Chu Bu Chu to persuade Feng Xiao in her stead. Qin Miaoyu reported that not only had Chu Bu Chu not seen Feng Xiao for the past few days, he hadn't set foot outside the Shuoyue bureau at all. Could he be jealous? Feng Xiao was instantly certain that he was. And 54. But given Chu Bu Chu's reserved and brooding nature, he would never admit it directly. In that case, Feng Xiao would deign to ask after Chu Bu Chu, lest the poor man make himself ill with sulking. He'd only just managed to recuperate, after all. This would ruin his health all over again. With this in mind, Deputy Chief Feng tidied his clothes, touched his slightly cool and prickly scalp, and sauntered off toward the Shuoyue bureau. At the same time, a different guest had come to call on Chu Bu Chu. The chief of the Shuoyue bureau usually had little patience for socializing, but today he was in an oddly good mood. He sat down to converse with his guests, demonstrating a rare gentleness. When Feng Xiao arrived, he found Chu Bu Chu speaking to a girl with her head slightly bowed as if bashful. She paused every few words, but Chu Bu Chu never rushed her. Feng Xiao was only too familiar with this girl. Yuan Yiying, the granddaughter of the emperor and daughter of Princess Li Ping. Yuan Yihuan had been able to conceal her identity and wreak such havoc only thanks to Princess Li Ping's secret assistance. If the princess hadn't had a sudden change of heart and rushed to the palace, Empress Dugu might still be bedridden. After those events, the empress and her daughter were now of one heart. The empress couldn't bear to put the princess under house arrest, so 2 days ago, Yuan Yiying had been granted permission to visit. Grandmother and granddaughter embraced and cried, putting past grievances to rest, and the restrictions on the princess's residence was lifted. Feng Xiao knew all this, but it didn't explain why Yuan Yiying was here and speaking so comfortably with Chu Bu Chu at that. Neither of them raised their heads when he entered. He pointedly cleared his throat. Chu Bu Chu and Yuan Yiying both turned to look at him, and Chu Bu Chu's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Why has Deputy Chief Feng graced our Shuoyue bureau with a personal visit? You didn't even send someone to announce your arrival. We've been terribly rude. I beg your pardon. Feng Xiao had been standing in the doorway for ages. He refused to believe Chu Bu Chu hadn't seen him. Nonetheless, he smiled brightly. Please don't be so stiff, Chief Chu. I came to see you here every few days, yet I noticed you never come to see me. Shall I step back outside and try again so you can welcome me properly? 55. Chu Bu Chu's smile didn't reach his eyes. He gestured towards the doorway. Please. Yuan Yiying's gaze darted between them. Something unspeakably odd was going on here. She couldn't classify them as friends because every word they exchanged was barbed, yet she wasn't certain they were enemies because they didn't seem to hate each other either. Chief Chu, Yuan Yiying interjected. Chu Bu Chu and Feng Xiao turned to her as one. Timidly, she asked, May I stay at the Shuoyue bureau tonight? Of course. No! Chu Bu Chu and Feng Xiao spoke simultaneously, then glanced at each other. Feng Xiao arched a brow. Yuan Yiying was baffled. Chu Bu Chu reassured her gently. You can stay a few days if you wish, Duchess Yuan. Just send someone to inform the princess. It's no trouble. Yuan Ying nodded. Thank you, Chief Chu. Chubuchu had someone take her to the guest quarters, then turned to Feng Xiao with a slanted smile. What important business brings Deputy Chief Feng here today? Naturally, Feng Xiao didn't say that he was afraid Chubuchu would elope with a demoness. He followed Chubuchu's lead and took a seat, his posture straight-backed and proper. I came to see if Chubuchu was still alive. See if Chief Chu was still alive. If you were dead, I'd have to come to offer condolences and some money for your funeral. So Deputy Chief Feng hopes I'll die soon, said Chubuchu steadily. Then all those things you said at my bedside while I was on death's door were lies? Feng Xiao snorted. What things my venerable self doesn't remember? Chubuchu nodded thoughtfully. As the saying goes, there are 3 great joys in life. Wealth, a promotion, and a dead first wife. It seems Deputy Chief Feng is on the verge of being visited by 2 of them. Let me be the first to offer my congratulations. I hope you climb even higher and enjoy 100 years of happiness together. Feng Xiao sneered. Enough with this nonsense. I'm asking. He stopped short as if he'd choked on a walnut mid-sentence and stared at Chubuchu. What did you say? Climb even higher, 100 years of happiness together. Before that! By marrying Princess Lanling, Deputy Chief Feng will climb higher in the hierarchy. Isn't that the arrival of a great joy? Feng Xiao's gaze sharpened. He leaned forward like a predator watching its prey. I'm talking about the first line. Wealth, a promotion, and a dead first wife. Chubuchu feigned surprise. Is Deputy Chief Feng cursing Princess Lanling? Stop playing the fool. Feng Xiao cursed under his breath, grinding his teeth in anger. Could never let his guard down with this man. It was rare to hear a single sincere remark from his lips, and now he was playing it off. Action spoke louder than words. Feng Xiao grasped Chubuchu's chin, pulling him in for a deep kiss that silenced him completely. 56. Just as Chubuchu thought he was about to be swallowed, bones and all, Feng Xiao released him. I'll give you one more chance. Say that line again properly. If Chubuchu were the type to cave to threats, he wouldn't have been Chubuchu. Which line? The Empress wishes to arrange a marriage between you and Princess Lanling. Feng Xiao scoffed. If you're jealous, just say so. Why beat around the bush? Chubuchu quirked a brow. And do you dare claim you felt nothing when you saw me with Duchess Yuan? Feng Xiao was fuming. Do you even speak? Do you ever speak an honest word? Briefly, Chubuchu smiled. Stragglers from the 13 floors of Yunhai are still about. After the deaths of Xiao Li and Yuan Yihuan, some are taking out their frustrations on Princess Li Ping and her daughter. Someone at the princess's residence was poisoned, so Princess Li Ping is currently residing at the palace. Duchess Yuan will remain at the Shuoyue Bureau to assist with the investigation. Now, are you satisfied? What do you mean by satisfied? Feng Xiao drawled, ever the contrarian. My venerable self has never cared. I was only needling you earlier. I have no intention of marrying Princess Lanling. I was planning to go to the palace tomorrow to tell the Empress as much. Yet here you are working yourself into a panic. You say you're not concerned, but I know you've been gritting your teeth in private. My venerable self has no choice but to step in to reassure you. If you let your personal feelings cloud your judgment and refuse to cooperate with the Jijian Bureau over this, wouldn't that jeopardize our shared mission? This man could turn black into white with his outrageous statements. Chubuchu laughed in anger, then leaned in and sealed that lying mouth with his own lips. So that's another 2. Did I count wrong? I think I counted wrong. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 58. Okay. All right. We have the last epilogue and then our bonus story. All right. Epilogue 4. Growing Hair, Part 1. Shaving one's hair off was a simple task, but growing it back was not easy. I know. I recently got a haircut. Feng Xiao stroked his fuzzy head. His hair was neither long nor short, and although he'd said nothing, he was quietly searching for remedies to simulate its growth. He wished with all his might that he would wake up in the morning with enough hair to make a bun again. Feng Er, who'd always had absolute confidence in his looks, now felt a sliver of doubt as he gazed in the mirror. He began to pay increasing attention to hair care formulas. This had to be kept from Chubuchu at all costs, or he'd definitely come up with some plan to mess with him. Lately, Qin Miao Yu, too, was troubled. She'd been given a new mission. Deputy Chief Fang had tasked her with finding hair growth formulas, demanding that his hair grown from half an inch to shoulder length in a month. At the end of this time, the Jijian Bureau had a mission that would take them to Jiangnan, and Feng Er intended to go himself. Seeing as he'd be out in public, he couldn't look unkempt. It was impossible. Even the gods wouldn't be able to do it. Still, since her superior demanded it, Qin Miaoyu could only do her best. 3 days later, as Feng Xiao stood looking at a bewildering array of items, various herbal baths, acupuncture needles, ointments, even magical talismans, he sank into thought. I think this is probably one of my absolute... These are fantastic. These 2 up in the case are my favorite. No, don't turn away. And it being cold. Those are adorable. I really love Miao Yu. Miao Mi, I think, is the artist. Hang on. Me.Mimo. There we go. Me.Mimo. Jealousy. The entire capital knew Princess Lan Ling had fallen for Feng Xiao. However, due to her reserved nature, she hadn't made her feelings overt. Out of sympathy for their daughter, the Emperor and Empress had repeatedly suggested marriage to Feng Xiao. Yet, despite their efforts, he remained steadfast in his refusal, leaving them with no choice but to seek another match for their daughter. Yet Feng Xiao still felt Chubuchu's reaction to the situation was far too mild. So mild, it was as if he didn't care about Feng Xiao at all. The next evening, when Chubuchu came personally to the Jijian Bureau to discuss business, he found Feng Xiao gone. Pei Jingzi informed him that Feng Er had left to spend the evening at Changming House. The name was familiar to Chu, as was the nature of Changming House's business. Changming House was situated in the pleasure district, but it wasn't just any brothel. This establishment was a gathering spot for musicians and dancers from across the land and a favorite haunt of the city's wealthy officials. On the 1st and 15th of every month, Changming House was decorated with lanterns and filled with music so beautiful its melodious notes might have been played by the gods themselves. Why had Feng Er gone to Ming House if not to enjoy himself? Could he be investigating a case? Chu had no love for such entertainments. He'd rather spend what free time he had at the Shuyui Bureau, never stepping outside. But right now, he had urgent business to discuss with Feng Xiao. Sending someone to relay a message would waste valuable time, so he had no choice but to go in person. He found Feng Er sitting with a few others as the dancers began their performance, their movements graceful and seductive. Upon noticing Chief Chu, he raised a brow. Chu didn't acknowledge him. He settled himself in an empty seat a little distance away, as if he and Feng Xiao were strangers. As the song and dance reached their crescendo, the guests' excitement grew. Some left their seats to dance with the performers, yet, despite the convivial atmosphere, Feng Xiao noticed that Chu's gaze never met his. His focus was entirely on the dancer. He appeared mesmerized, as if he was watching a celestial maiden descended from heaven itself, unable to tear his eyes away. Feng Er frowned a little, refusing to admit to a twinge of displeasure. In any case, it was only a twinge. Once the song ended, the dancer bowed and gracefully withdrew. Feng Er took the opportunity to saunter over to Chu and sit beside him. "It's rare to see you here, Chief Chu. How fortuitous. Why don't we share a drink?" Chu glanced at him but didn't reply. He returned to watching the dancers. In a moment of pure impulse, Feng Xiao did something he would soon come to regret. He grasped Chu's chin and directed his gaze back to himself. 59. A rush of wind swept up behind them. Feng Xiao instinctively pulled Chu into his arms and rolled aside as the surrounding guests sat stunned. Only then did realization dawn. Chu hadn't been watching the musician behind her. The man had drawn a sword from his zither. He swept toward Feng Xiao, intent on killing him. Alas, Feng Xiao's martial arts had improved drastically after his battle with Xiao Le at the tavern. He had broken through his bottleneck and climbed even higher, achieving a grandmaster's level of cultivation. The moves of ordinary experts were obvious and clumsy to his eyes. He and this man were worlds apart. The assassin was quickly subdued. Upon interrogating him, they learned that despite Xiao Lu's death, remnants of the 13 floors still roamed the world. The musician had been one of those steadfastly loyal to Xiao Lu. He wanted revenge, regardless of whether it meant throwing his life away. Even injuring Feng Xiao would have been enough. But those were all things that happened after. In the moment, Feng Xiao saw Chu give him a cold smile as if mocking his overreaction. Silently, he mouthed a single word. "Idiot." Growing Hair, Part 2. The day the Jijian Bureau went south to Jiangnan, Feng Xiao finally had enough hair to pull into a bun. This was through no effort of his own or Qin Miaoyu's, but thanks to Chu, who'd gifted him a wig. Deputy Chief Feng, who'd always prided himself on his peerless elegance and grace, had never foreseen that one day he'd be forced to bear such an indignity. To add insult to injury, the wig was neither black nor white, but a dull gray. And Xiao had no idea where Chubachu had found the wretched thing. He accepted it with a sneer of disdain. Yet over 10 years later, Chubachu would discover that Feng Xiao had stored the hated wig in a box. It was carefully nestled inside, neat and proper, and still looked as good as new. He did give him a wig. Yeah. I think it's really sweet that even though he's, absolutely hated it, he still kept it neat and proper. $205.45. Okay, bonus story. The fields were muddy after the rain. Dewdrops glimmered, and the scent of fresh grass lingered on the breeze. At a tea house just off the main road, the noon sun shone down on 2 men and 2 horses. There was only one worker at the tea house. He hurried over to greet them, helping both men tie their horses to the hitching post before bringing fodder and water. Such a small place, but you have everything, Pei Jingzi said in surprise. Is business here good? The man, who served as a shopkeeper, waiter, and cook all in one, laughed. You flatter me. I live in that small village right by the main road. It's less than a mile round trip. It's neither time for the spring sowing nor the autumn harvest, so I do a little business here to make things easier on passing travelers. His remark was directed at Pei Jingzi, but his eyes darted toward the man beside him. Seeming to sense his gaze, Feng Xiao lifted his head to look at him. The man looked a bit embarrassed at being caught out. My lord, please forgive me for staring. You're very handsome. I've never seen anyone as elegant as you. I couldn't help but take a few more glances. You're quite good-looking yourself, said Feng Xiao, though you're nowhere near as handsome as me. 60? The man scratched his head. My mother always said I was the best-looking one in our village. Feng Xiao smiled. Did your mother ever tell you you're actually a cross-dressing woman? The man was taken aback, and then he burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha! My lord jests. I'm a man through and through. Feng Xiao looked him over. The village you mentioned lost most of its able-bodied men to war, he said slowly. The remaining inhabitants are the elderly, infants too young to speak, and women. Yet you are both young and strong. If you are not a cross-dressing woman, what are you? Pei Jingzi had just raised the teacup to his lips when he heard this. He suddenly felt that the cup was scorching hot and yearned to fling it away. The man noticed Pei Jingzi's movements and laughed again. Ha 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 ha! What are you laughing at? Pei Jingzi asked. The man grinned. I'm laughing at how pathetic Deputy Chief Feng's subordinates are. Look at you. How on earth did the Jijian Bureau manage to eradicate so many experts from the 13 floors of Yunhai? It's truly unfathomable. Pei Jingzi leapt up and glared at the man. If Feng Xiao hadn't said anything, he would have attacked, but... You're not his match, Feng Xiao said. The man smiled again. As expected, Deputy Chief Feng is most astute. Alright, so that's another injustice. And actually, that's 2, because he got insulted by the man running the stall, or the assassin running the stall, and then he got subtly insulted by Feng Xiao, called out by Feng Xiao. So, our injustice to Pei Jingzi is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Poor Feng Xiao. Oh, who are you? Cried Pei Jingzi. Who he is isn't important, said Feng Xiao. Your question should be, why is he here? The man nodded. Then why don't you tell me, Deputy Chief Feng? Why am I here? I know your name, said Feng Xiao. So you've been waiting for me specifically. But I have no idea what you want so badly that you'd set up a roadside shelter in the rain just to meet me. I want your sect leader's seal, said the man. Straightforward. I appreciate that. His appearance wasn't particularly striking. In contrast to Feng Xiao's jade-like complexion, his skin was tanned by the sun. But as he spoke those calm and unremarkable words, an invisible pressure rolled toward them. Pei Jingzi found his knees buckling and had to grab the table for support in order not to embarrass himself. Shit. As the saying went, those with good intentions didn't show up uninvited. Pei Jingzi fretted silently. If his real lord were here, he would have nothing to worry about, but right now, if something could go wrong, it would. Pei Jingzi's unease was instantly vindicated when the man narrowed his eyes at Feng Xiao. You're not Feng Xiao. Feng Xiao found himself unperturbed. Why do you say so? The man glanced at Pei Jingzi. Just now, his expression was panicked. He's afraid I'll attack. Besides, the real Feng Xiao would have recognized me by now. Feng Xiao smiled. Miao Wen Xin. It's true, I'm not your match. But if you harm me, you'll find yourself even further from what you want. The Fa Jing sect leader's seal. His identity exposed, the man snorted. You know who I am. But who are you? Miao Wen Xin had never been able to keep his temper in check. If he had, he wouldn't have lost the position of Fa Jing sect leader. When he saw that the fake Feng Xiao was unwilling to answer his question, fury surged in him. He struck out with his palm. In recent years, Miao Wen Xin had become infamous in the Jianghu for massacring entire families. People quaked in fear upon hearing his name. He spent some of his time in the south and traveled in Goguryeo at others. The Central Plains were currently divided, but even if they had been unified, someone as powerful as Miao Wen Xin would have been difficult to capture. An ominous feeling rose in Pei Jingzi. He, too, had heard this man's name. He felt the crushing wind of Miao Wen Xin's palm sweeping toward them like a raging storm of ice and frost, and swiftly countered, thrusting his sword at Miao Wen Xin's face. To his surprise, Miao Wen Xin abandoned his attack on Feng Xiao and turned to target him instead. Pei Jingzi fell back at once. Within seconds, the two were fighting furiously on the main road beside the tea house. After all the trouble they'd had with the 13 floors of Yunhai, Pei Jingzi had begun to feel increasingly inadequate, both physically and mentally. He feared his shortcomings would hold the Daijian Bureau back. Determined to improve himself, he'd become more diligent in his training. But success on the path of martial arts depended on three things: talent, effort, and experience. Despite his efforts, Pei Jingzi lacked any extraordinary aptitude, and his lack of experience amplified his struggles. How could he possibly catch up in such a short period of time? The longer he fought, the more panicked he became. No more than 20 moves later, Miao Wen Xin struck his acupoint and landed a heavy blow on his chest. Pei Jingzi crashed to the ground. Trash! Miao Wen Xin sneered at them. The two of you dare pose as members of the Fa Jing sect with your paltry capabilities? He approached Feng Xiao, his steps deliberate. Feng Xiao sighed. Are you not curious, Miao Wen Xin? I might not be the real Feng Xiao, but I know everything about you and the Fa Jing sect. I even know what you came here for. Of course, the fake Feng Xiao wasn't a match for Miao Wen-shin, because he was Chu Chu in disguise. The chief of the Shuoyui Bureau didn't know a lick of martial arts. Forget about a palm strike, even a flick of Miao Wen-shin's finger would leave him gravely injured. But such was Chief Chu's power. Even in this scenario, a single sentence from him stopped Miao Wen-shin in his tracks. "Hand over the sect leader's seal, and I might spare your life," he said. Chubuju smiled. "The seal isn't with me, but I know where it is." Miao Wen-shin moved like lightning. He sealed Chubuchu's acupoints and grabbed his shoulder. "Take me to it." And where was the true Deputy Chief Fang at this moment? He was handling a case. More specifically, he was wearing Chubuchu's face as he played Wei Qi and discussed philosophy with a woman from Sila. The woman was no ordinary commoner, but rather Commandery Princess Bogyeon, the daughter of the nation's king. Fragrant incense curled through the air as the princess chatted and laughed. No matter how one looked at it, Feng Xiao seemed here to enjoy himself rather than investigate. Standing beside them, Xiao Xian could see that Feng Xiao's hand was practically on top of Princess Bogyeon's delicate fingers. He pulled Chubuju's face into a lecherous grin. Xiao Xian's eyes twitched. "What's wrong with your guard?" asked Princess Bogyeon sweetly. "Does he want you to leave?" "Please pay him no mind. He's unwell. He's born with a condition that makes him twitch from time to time. But he's loyal, so I kept him around. If you find him off-putting, I'll send him away." "You're the one who's unwell," thought Xiao Xian. She wiped all expression from her face and stared straight ahead. The tale of how she ended up here with Feng Xiao, disguised as a man, was a long one. Sila was one of the trio of kingdoms in the northern peninsula, along with Baekji and Goguryeo, that had maintained a delicate balance of power for years. Goguryeo had been bent on invading the Central Plains for just as long. They tried several times, using methods both covert and overt, and their royal house had even established the Buyeo sect, which had served the 13 floors of Yunhai to oppose the Central Plains. The 13 floors of Yunhai had collapsed with the death of Xiao Le, but remnant forces remained hidden in the dark, plotting their revival. And although Goguryeo and Silla were mortal enemies, Princess Bogyeon happened to have deep ties to the fallen Buyeo sect. Feng Xiao had learned from Chubuchu that Princess Bogyeon had a reputation for promiscuity and a fondness for beautiful men. Years ago, a martial arts manual belonging to the Hehuan sect had fallen into her hands. The book detailed parasitic cultivation techniques, and she had taken to them like a fish to water. As if this wasn't enough on its own, the king of Silla spoiled her rotten, and thus the princess did whatever she pleased in her home country. But her arrogance was only one aspect of her character. According to reports obtained by the Shuoyui Bureau, she maintained clandestine communications with both the 13th floor. According to reports obtained by the Shuoyui Bureau, she maintained clandestine communications with both the 13th floors and the Gokturks. She even had a complex built in Silla, Meng Xi Pavilion, where she kept a number of handsome young men. Ostentatiously, this was for her own amusement, but in truth it was a facility for training assassins used to eliminate the crown prince of Silla's enemies. Her Meng Xi Pavilion had also collaborated with the 13 floors to stir up trouble in the Central Plains. Feng Xiao's own sect, the Fajing sect, had once had a member by the name of Miao Wen-shin. He had been the martial brother of the previous sect leader Guang Lingsan. Yet at some point they turned on each other, and Miao Wen-shin had renounced the sect and disappeared. Rumor said he'd gone to Silla, where he'd grown close to Princess Bo-Gyeon and perhaps become a trusted confidant. Chubuchu had recently been ordered to look into several murder cases involving court officials. After a thorough investigation, all leads pointed to this Miao Wen-shin. The case now not only had the attention of the Shuyue and Jiajian bureaus, it also involved Feng Xiao's sect. Naturally, both Feng Xiao and Chubuchu had taken a special interest. As for why the two were disguised as each other, the first reason was that, while Princess Bo-Gyeon had a taste for handsome men, she disdained those like Feng Xiao who overshadowed her brilliance. She much preferred a man like Chubuchu, the fair and handsome Taoist scholar. The colder and more aloof a man was, the more he hewed to her taste, and so Chubuchu was the most suitable choice. The second reason was that Princess Bo-Gyeon was surrounded by experts. She herself was a decent martial artist, while also being shy, sly, and unpredictable. Although Chubuchu was clever, he'd be easy prey in an ambush. Feng Xiao had thought it safer if he handled the case himself. As for the third reason, before they'd set out, they'd finally received news of Miao Wen-shin's whereabouts. Chubuchu had taken men in pursuit, leaving Feng Xiao on his own. He'd had no choice but to be the one to confront Princess Bo-Gyeon, whether he wished to or not. The princess's true interest wasn't in the game. They'd barely started playing when she fluttered her lashes at Feng Xiao. Shou Long-jun, you said you were an old acquaintance of Miao Wen-shin. Why have I never heard Miao Long mention you? She merely brushed Feng Xiao's fingertips, yet the touch was seductive and lingering, like she was unfastening his garments instead. Even the most experienced of men would find themselves helpless before such charms. Sure enough, Feng Xiao's gaze flickered, and he took in a dazed look, as if entranced. A moment later, he seemed to master himself and bring his focus back to the match. Princess Bo-Gyeon was secretly delighted. She loved men, but what she truly enjoyed wasn't the pleasures of the flesh. It was watching exceptional men grovel at her feet. The prouder and more aloof a man was, the more she relished the challenge. And Feng Xiao was, without a doubt, the finest specimen she'd encountered in some years. I'm not surprised he didn't mention me. When he fled our sect, he stole one of our manuals. He's too ashamed to bring up his martial siblings. But he was good to me while we were both in the sect, and we still share some sentimental attachment. The sect recently got word that he was in the Central Plains and issued an order to kill him. I heard the princess was acquainted with him, so I came to pass along a warning. Ping Xiao is immune because he is gay. Ha ha ha. Yeah. I mean, he appreciated beauty, but he also has the idea like, I'm better than all of you, so does it really matter? I heard the princess was acquainted with him, so I came to pass along a warning. Princess Bo-Gyeon's soft hum was sweet enough to melt men's bones. So you came for him, and not for me. She raised a slender finger, rosy at the end, where it had been dipped in the juice of balsam flowers, and lightly poked Feng Xiao's forehead. Scoundrel! But after meeting the princess, Feng Xiao sighed softly. Oh. Princess Bo-Gyeon raised her lovely eyes to look at him. He finished. I thought it's a pity. What's a pity? The princess is so lovely and charming, while Miao Wen-shin's looks and conduct are the opposite. Yet you took such an interest in him. Isn't that a pity? He did his best imitation of Chubuchu's cold and arrogant countenance and biting tone. As expected, Princess Bo-Gyeon was momentarily overwhelmed. Then she giggled sweetly. Miao Wen-shin isn't as bad as you say. but compared to you, he's as a spark to the bright moon. A vast chasm lies between you. She threw down her wiki piece and pouted. I don't want to play anymore. Let's do something more exhilarating. Her fingers trailed up Feng Xiao's wrist and arm, separated from his skin by a single layer of fabric. Her gaze on him was ravenous, as if she wished to devour him whole. She cast a glance at Qiao Xian and giggled. Your guard is quite handsome himself. If he insists on staying, why not let him join in on the fun? Feng Xiao hooked a finger beneath her chin. What kind of fun? Whatever you like, said the princess. I'll follow your lead. However, I have one condition. You must bring the real owner of your face to me. I have no interest in a low-quality counterfeit. Before Qiao Xian could react, the two maids who'd been standing like wooden puppets behind the princess were lunging toward her. Qiao Xian had surrendered her sword upon entering, yet even unarmed, she held her ground against her two opponents. Princess Bogian had no interest in the fight. Her eyes remained fixed on Feng Xiao. Every move you make, every frown and smile, is beyond what the average person can replicate. You must be quite handsome yourself. Let me see your real face. Then we can discuss your motives for approaching me under the guise of Miao Lang's sektmate. Feng Xiao smiled. I've long heard of the princess's beauty. When the opportunity to see you arose, I couldn't help but be curious. And now that you've seen me, what do you think? You're nothing special. The princess's smile turned cold. I dare you to say that again. I said you're ordinary, no different from the mediocre masses, and your laugh resembles the clucking of a hen. If I didn't think you had information on the remnants of the 13 floors, my venerable self would never waste my precious face and time on you. Now that everything's out in the open, it certainly makes things easier. Come, I'll let you choose. Will it be the Shu Yue Bureau or the Jijian Bureau? The gentleman has no manners. You dare to speak to me this way in my own territory? Princess Bogian sneered. Go on then. But first tell me, can you move anything right now besides your mouth? Feng Xiao found it was true. He was frozen in place. What did you do to me? The princess's beautiful lips curled. The weki pieces. From the moment you touch them, you are poisoned by a secret drug from Sila. Without the antidote, your flesh and bones will grow increasingly stiff until you die as rigid as a wooden puppet. You can become one of the dolls in my collection. Won't that be nice? What is it with, demonic cultivators, and humans and human skin, making human dolls? Anyway, you can become one of the dolls in my collection. Won't that be nice? She stroked Feng Xiao's face, ghosting her fingers over his chin. Where does the mask start? I can't find the seam. Whoever disguised you must be remarkably skilled. Feng Xiao smiled. The artist is fighting your subordinates right now. Could you please remove your fingers? You're so ugly, I'll need to take several baths now that you've touched me. Princess Bogyan felt a sudden sharp pain in her chest. She flew backward and crashed heavily to the floor. The two maids were stunned. Before they could rush to their mistress, Feng Xiao flashed in front of them. They were decent martial artists who could hold their own against Qiao Xian, but before Feng Xiao, they were little better than clay chickens. Neither of them could land even a single blow. Princess Bogyan clutched her chest on the ground, coughing up blood. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. How did you... Feng Xiao shook his head. I did wonder why Xiao Lu never valued you. With your skills, why couldn't you secure a position within the 13 floors yourself? Turns out you were simply too stupid. If you can use poison, why can't I? Princess Bogion coughed up more blood in rage, her eyes bulging. Feng Xiao turned to Qiao Xian. Your lord spent so long coddling you, yet you're completely useless in his time of need. If you were here today instead of me, wouldn't this woman have devoured you both? Qiao Xian internally rolled her eyes. How do you know this wasn't all part of our lord's plan? He knows you're good at dealing with this type of woman. He just gave you a chance to show off. Feng Xiao ignored her silent censure. He dusted himself off and sauntered toward the exit. Before leaving, he tossed into his shoulder. Summon some people and clean this up properly. Princess Bogion has many capable subordinates. Don't mess up something this easy. What about you? Qiao Xian called after him. Me? Naturally, I'm going to play the hero who saves the beauty. He disappeared through the door without looking back. Somehow, Feng Er hadn't expected that following the hints Chubuchu left him would lead not to the rescue of a beauty, but instead to this bizarre scene. Miao Wenxin tied to a tree, screaming a torrent of filthy words. Even Feng Xiao frowned at the racket. The beauty he sought was reading in the shade of the tree as if Miao Wenxin didn't exist. Feng Xiao hadn't anticipated that Chubuchu would confront Miao Wenxin so quickly. Miao Wenxin was a skilled martial artist. Even 2 of Pei Jingzi shouldn't have been enough to defeat him, let alone the sickly Chubuchu. There's another for injustice to Pei Jingzi. 31. Despite acting separately, it seemed they'd each met with similarly unforeseen events. For example, Feng Xiao hadn't foreseen that Princess Bogion would be even uglier than he imagined. But he digressed. Feng Xiao looked more closely at Miao Wenxin and found that what he had assumed to be ropes binding him to the tree were in fact zither strings that cut into his flesh. Who was here? Guangling-san, he asked suspiciously. Don't tell me you were colluding with him the entire time. Chubuchu looked up from his book. What do you mean, colluding? I should have expected your dog mouth to put it that way. Feng Er snorted and plucked up a stone. He threw it at Miao Wenxin's mute acupoint, cutting off his screams of profanity. He was willing to see you, but didn't have the guts to meet with me. I suspect he wanted to spare himself the sight of a peacock strutting about. The last words came out around a cough. One was followed by several more until he was forced to set aside his book and clutch his chest. Feng Xiao looked at Chubuchu with disdain. He knelt and pulled him into his arms, channeling internal energy into him to soothe his breathing. Why didn't he take Miao Wenxin with him? He said when he was done. Leaving him with the Shuyue Bureau has its uses. We can extract valuable information about the Buyeo sect and the remnants of the 13 floors from him. He knows we won't miss any clues. Chubuchu coughed twice more, then added. Guangling-san has been tracking Miao Wenxin's whereabouts for some time. He was the one who came to me and shared this lead in the first place. But you didn't tell me. Dissatisfaction colored Feng Xiao's tone. Chubuchu's lips curved ever so slightly. That was at his request as well. I'm impartial in this. I can't go back on my word. He has his own reasons for not wanting to see you. Feng Xiao sneered. He's just afraid I'll return the Fajing sect to him. Chubuchu doubled over again, his coughs growing louder. Feng Xiao fell silent. He began channeling internal energy to Chubuchu in even greater quantities. The essence of the Jade of Heaven Lake had improved Chubuchu's health significantly, but he'd never be truly well. His ailments were chronic, a result of ill health at birth, exacerbated by torment suffered in his childhood. From time to time, some malady or other was guaranteed to flare up and trouble him. It was a long time before his coughing gradually eased. Miao Wen-shin, gagged and bound to the tree, felt he was about to suffocate. He'd spent the first half of his life prideful and defiant, the second half drifting aimlessly. After leaving the Fajing sect, he'd thought a wider world with grander opportunities awaited him. Yet after years of collaborating with the Buyeo sect and conspiring with Princess Bogyan, he seemed to be going in circles, unable to earn any of the recognition he felt he deserved. The Fajing sect was the most elusive of the three demonic sects, their forces hidden deep within the imperial court. Yet even after casting them aside, Miao Wen-shin had wasted so many years and achieved nothing. He was more miserable now than ever. Of course he was dissatisfied. That resentment yearned for release, but when Guang Lingsan had captured him, he'd said nothing. He'd simply tied him to this tree and drifted away. Even the pair in front of him, there was two. Miao Wen-shin watched as the Feng Chu pair whispered in each other's ears, their cheeks brushing. That's another one. They were ignoring him completely, as if he was a tree trunk or a stone. It was infuriating. I'll take that as 2. Anger roiled in Miao Wen-shin's chest. He wanted to howl at the sky and drown them both in his spittle. But even when he choked on his own blood and rage, neither of them turned to look at him. He hated them. If the heavens would only grant him another chance, if he could return to the time when he'd still been in the Fajing sect. Darkness clouded his vision, and he knew no more. This guy is too annoying. I can't enjoy myself at all if I have to look at him, Feng Xiao complained, hoisting Chubu-Chu up in his arms. I'll send Pei Jingzi to deal with the mess. 32 for Pei Jingzi. And another for a shameless. Chubu-Chu rolled his eyes. Pei Jingzi, feeding mosquitoes a distance away, felt an inexplicable shiver go up his spine. And that is the end of Peerless. And of course it ends with an injustice to Pei Jingzi. Of course. Oh my goodness. We did it! And we didn't have any buffering issues tonight. Yes! Which is hilarious because the weather is supposed to be terrible. But I'll take it. Anyway, thank you all who are listening live right now. I appreciate you being here as we finish this out. And thank you so much to everyone who listened later. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will hopefully see you for our next series, Copper Coins. Thank you for the hearts. I see you giving me hearts in the bottom. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have, woohoo! That's right. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening or day. And I agree, Peerless is so good. The ending was a little abrupt, but I don't mind it. I enjoyed the extra stories and glad we got some illustrations back there. That was awesome as well. But yes, good night to all my book garden, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.